Sebastian here for Comic Impact, bringing you the impactful origin for this week. And with the announcement of Jon Bernthal starring in Daredevil Season 2 on Netflix, who else would we talk about but the Punisher? The Punisher first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 129 in 1974. He was created by Gerry Conway, Ross Andru, John Romita Sr., and his namesake, the Punisher, was given to him by none other than Stan Lee himself. In that original Spider-Man story, he was actually the antagonist hunting down Spider-Man, whom he believed had killed Norman Osborn. In that story, he had a bit of a partner in the Jackal, and that's where a lot of our character moments come from. We learn that he's simply an ex-Marine with no other explanation really given for his skill set. The Punisher made many appearances in many books, but it wasn't until pretty much the 80s where he got his own dedicated series, but he made appearances alongside heroes and villains. He even made appearances as Frank Castle in Marvel Comics' The Nam, which we'll get back to in a little bit. Now, it wasn't until a year later in 1975 where the Punisher's origin was finally laid out for readers. In Marvel Preview number 2, Frank Castle's tragic tale begins on a fateful day in Central Park on a picnic with his family, where unfortunately they are caught in the crossfire of a mob war and are killed. Frank Castle, a broken man with his dead family in his arms, decides to fight a one-man war on crime. And this is a very interesting juxtaposition. Now, the turning point for a character like the Punisher really does begin here, where before he was willing to kill anybody who stood in his way. He was part assassin, part vigilante. Here we do get that Batman-esque superhero, but with the twist that he is very much a ruthless killer. And in Frank Miller's Daredevil, that's covered in a little bit more detail in the story arc that would eventually become the death of Elektra in issues 181 through 184. We get a good juxtaposition between a character like the Punisher and Daredevil. Daredevil is he's a defense attorney, he's a bit more liberal, and of course he is a classic hero in that sense that he doesn't really kill his villains, whereas the Punisher, being essentially a very broken human being, Batman-esque, if you will. We'll get to Batman in another show. He's shown as having a very black and white worldview, and his resolution to his problems is very finite and very fixed. The killing of essentially the enemy of the story is the end of a story. And of course, this made it very hard for a character like Frank Castle to really sort of flourish. While he had many series and miniseries, they didn't really have any sort of recurring villains. Now, he did have a few characters like Bushwhacker and Jigsaw, who was a mob enforcer, of course, scarred horribly, kind of Frankenstein-esque. And it wasn't until Frank Miller really did take the character and give new life to him that the Kingpin truly became a staple Punisher villain. And of course the Kingpin is also a shared villain between Daredevil and Spider-Man, all a trio of street-level heroes. And then we sort of come to the present day. After many canceled series, Garth Ennis takes the Punisher and decides to pull him out of the Marvel Universe and give him his own series with Punisher Max. And in Punisher Max, there's no heroes, there's no villains, there's no superheroics. It is a very grounded war story, but the war isn't in a desert or in a jungle, it's in New York. And he's taking out mob bosses and enforcers and drug cartels and drug dealers and rapists and murderers, basically acting as the only type of ultra-violent vigilante in this world. And it wasn't until a little bit later that Garth Ennis continued on with the Punisher story, doing a story called Punisher Born, another story I recommend, and this is where we get back to Vietnam. In that story, he takes Frank Castle and brings him back to the earliest origins of the Punisher, in that he did make brief appearances in Marvel's The Nam, and he takes that and he sort of stretches it out into the idea that the Punisher, while being the hero that he is in the Marvel Universe, wasn't necessarily created in Central Park when his family was killed, but in the hell that was the war in Vietnam. And that's very fascinating, so go check it out. If you're a history buff, please check out Marvel's The Nam, and if you love the Punisher and want a very fascinating sort of extension on his origin, please check out Punisher Born by Garth Ennis, and go pick up that Daredevil run, and if you can find them, get some Punisher Essentials. Read that classic stuff, it's really good. And of course, A character like the Punisher has been a main staple in comics for a very, very long time. Now, of course, he was played by Dolph Lundgren at one point in film. Thomas Jane famously played him in 2004, and then again in a short film entitled Dirty Laundry. Ray Stevenson also played him in Punisher Warzone, but he's also made appearances in the animated movie Rise of the Technovore and the 90s Spider-Man animated series. He's a very, very cool character. Oh, and he also had his own video game starring Thomas Jane as well, which acted as a quasi-sequel to his Punisher film. It's actually really, really good. If you can find a copy and you still have a PlayStation 2, go check it out. And that brings us to the end of this brief origin of the Punisher. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like this video and want to see more, give me a like, hit the subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Hey, and check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're everywhere. Go check it out, and thank you very much for watching. I'll hope to see you next week.